Can you, what's your opinion on if you should jump in front of a bullet for your wife or not?
Well, so I have a different worldview than Brian does. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian. I follow Christian ethics. So under an ethical system, I was enjoying the initial answer by the gal with the ginormous blue cross on her chest, where she said that there is a representation of how men and women are supposed to act as representations of the church, not only in marriage, but also in greater society. But I also enjoyed your answer when you were talking about the ontological differences and that there's greater duties between men and women. The reason I'm testing your guys' logic is because I seem to note that you understand that the men have higher duties, but I'm not so sure that you understand what yours are. So my take on this is, of course, for my wife, I would absolutely lay down my life, and I already have, essentially, right? I've spent most of my adult life taking care of her, and I've spent my entire adult life taking care of my children as well. So I would say that that's already laying down the time of my life to take care of that. But yeah, I would also physically do this, but I follow a different ethical system. And so that's
if I may, I know the verse that I quoted earlier about the husband's role in the marriage. The women's role, I think it's important to talk about as well, because it says the husbands must love their wives, but women respect your husbands. And so that's like
that's not what it says. It says that you need to submit to your husband.
Yeah, it says respect and
that's
submit.
not respect. That submission is different. That's an overage, right? There's more to it than just respecting. Submission does not just mean respect. That means submission, and that's something which is absent in society, and that's why guys like Brian refuse to take a bullet for women, because they refuse to submit to patriarchal authority. And if they did, he would be far more inclined to do so. That's why, by the way, he would do it for his children. He would do it for his children because they see him as an authority, a patriarchal authority in the household, and so he knows that that's his greater duty. But why would he have a greater duty to women who don't submit?
That was beautiful.
I agree.
That was well put.
I completely agree. And you're right, it does say that.
Andrew.
And I think that's a huge reason why a lot of women nowadays, there are issues with women not submitting to their significant other or their husband, or submitting to the wrong people. And I think that's how a lot of women get to where they are today, is because they've submitted to the wrong person and they've been hurt. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a response to, okay, well, that must be where I went wrong.
I'm not confident that I believe your framework, that the reason that there's so many of these women who are damaged is because they refuse to submit. I would actually counter that the reason so many of them are damaged is because they wouldn't do it, right? They wouldn't actually submit. That's what I think is going on. I don't think that they embraced submission and had a bad time. I think that the opposite is true. They refused to embrace submission, and that's what gave them the bad time. Yeah. For instance, when we go around this table, the reason we got all the lifetime stories from everybody and made sure that we could get down why it is that you guys, what your occupations are and the different things that you believe. Do you think, for instance, that the gal in the blue, the OnlyFans worker, do you think that she's going to be submitting to a man anytime soon? Because I don't think she is. In fact, she pretty confidently said no. She's not even interested in marriage, she's not interested in children, she's not interested in any of that. There's no interest in submission. So I don't think it's a submission issue. I think it's a will issue. They're willful, and they're disobedient. And they're disobedient in society.
Only in the bedroom.
Hang on, I'm almost done. They reject patriarchy, and I think that is the kind of fundamental cause of these flaws.
You're interested in being submissive?
Yeah, I would quit OnlyFans.
Oh, that was going to be my question. So, for example, hypothetical, if me and you were dating and I said, don't like that you're doing OnlyFans, I want you to delete it right now, would you do it?
And you were like totally in love with him.
I mean, I would need to survive, so I couldn't, I'd have to figure it out. But in theory, yes, I would do that. I would have no problem doing that.
All right, let me read one chat, and then we're going to get into, we'll get into the man versus bear, the main topic of tonight. Natalia, can you read this for us, please?
Why do women think, who hurt you? Is an intelligent comeback? Of course it was a woman. Many women these days are selfish, narcissistic scrumpets that don't care about their actions. Should embarrass you.
Thank you, Nickelodeon. I think this was maybe directed at you because you said, who hurt you? Was that you?
It should embarrass me, but it just doesn't.
I like that
I
word,
wanted to just interject. I looked this up just to make sure that you were clear on this. It's Ephesians 22. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body, meaning that submission in all ways to the husband, you're supposed to liken it as you do unto the Lord, which means the same way that you submit to God is the same way you're supposed to submit to your husband.
And
now,
that's
what are
assuming
restrictions
that you
would
have a
put-
godly husband.
I just want to ask this question real quick.
Yeah.
What would be the restrictions that you would put on a submission to God?
Nothing. And it's
Nothing.
even said, and it
Nothing,
even says
exactly.
later in that verse that even if your husband is not a godly man, your submission will prompt him to become a godly man, because he'll take heart and want to be a good leader to your relationship, want to be a good leader to your family. And so I think the point you're getting at is, why does it not start with the woman? Why should the woman not be the first one to submit and then the husband follows? I think that I completely agree with you, if that is your point.
Well, no, I guess my overarching point would be the first thing that you said, which is if you want to see the kind of flaw in the logic, the submission, if you want the man to do the best they possibly can for you, take a bite and things like this,
Just
you would have
Gerald
to
donated
submit.
$200. Andrew out here spitting hot fire. Lord of the Crucible, what books should I read that would bolster my skills in debate and further my understanding of logic and reason? Pen ready.
Andrew, do you want
The
to finish
Bible.
your point and then answer this?
Yeah, so yeah, back to the, I guess my overarching point instead is that if you really wanted to see a reflection of the church, as the man is the head and the representation of Christ, and the woman, the body, is the representation of the church, then submitting to him like you would unto the Lord. If you make the bold claim, there's no restriction to the submission you would give to the Lord God. Isn't it telling you to do the exact same thing here? And wouldn't you say that that's why you have such societal decadence? How can you look at a man like Brian, for instance, and be angry with him if he says, there's no possible way I would ever lay my life down for a woman unless I had what Ephesians 22 is talking about? How could he even blame him? You know what I mean? How could you even blame him?
I don't.
Yeah.
But I also,
You can't.
but I also say, what if Brian found a woman?
I still kind of blame him. I do, because I think he should still choose to take responsibility.
Wait, when you say responsibility, what do you mean?
Like, it doesn't matter how the girl is acting. You should still be taking responsibility.
Holy. Just to be clear,
Just
doesn't
like it
matter
doesn't
how
matter
the
how
girl
my
is
husband
acting?
is acting. If I had one, doesn't matter how my husband is acting. I should still be submitting.
What? Yeah, but actually this is counterintuitive to your own logic, right? So what if you're not submitting? What if you're not submitting?
What if who's not?
You.
Well, I should be.
Yeah, but if you're not, though.
Then he should still take responsibility.
Right. Okay. So do you see the gaping hole in your logic here?
Well, I just
the gaping
see
hole in your
that- I
logic
see
is that
that
you do not
both
have to
people
act
need
as
to
a
be
good
doing
wife.
it, but that's-
Hang on. Let me finish the point, and then you can respond. I promise. The hole in the logic, though, is to say that he should still be acting as though you are a submissive wife when you're not being a submissive wife. That is insane to me. That's counterintuitive to your own
Well,
logic.
I guess I didn't really mean that.
What? Okay.
I guess
Do you wanna
what
reframe?
I'm. Yes, I would like to reframe, please.
Okay.
I think that that doesn't change his role in how he should be leading somebody.
How do you lead somebody who doesn't submit to your leadership?
How do you submit to somebody who's not leading properly?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, the problem is that you don't. Let's say for a second that you join the military, okay? You have an expectation that you're going to do what it is that you're expected to do, and if you don't, there's consequences to that. That is part of leadership. So if the consequence to this is to say, for instance, hey, if you're a disobedient and non-submissive woman, non-submissive wife, the last thing I'm going to do is put myself in harm's way because my children are still going to need me. That's actually extremely reasonable and a rational response to that, isn't it?
So who goes first?
Yeah, can you tell me what the right
Well,
answer
women's,
is?
so the thing is you're supposed to take the plunge together, right? That's
Exactly.
the whole point. But as a relationship progresses, what we see more often than not is that women initiate divorce, and they initiate
Yes.
divorce for the stupidest reasons possible, and they initiate leaving a relationship for some of the stupidest reasons possible. That's the opposite, again, of submission. So if they're looking at it, we can make a good determination that women may start out submitting and then decide based on arbitrary means that they don't want to anymore. That's the whole point, right?
So what is a man supposed to do when he has a woman that's not being submissive?
Well, that's what Protestantism generally doesn't give you this, but that's what the ecclesiastical authority of the church is for. The authority of the church, you're not supposed to have the marriage to the state doesn't mean anything. It's totally irrelevant. It's nonsensical. There's no support for it. That's why.
Yeah.
There's no groundswell community support. The ecclesiastical authority of your church is supposed to be that groundswell and community support, which helps prevent that from happening. But within a secular framework, they don't have that. And so what ends up happening is these relationships basically get iced. The second a woman sees that, hey, this guy over here makes a little bit more money, he's more handsome, and he's into me, they tend to leave their husbands for that guy or for other arbitrary reasons. Whereas the church would provide massive quantities of shame from the community that they grew up in, and that's why that stuff didn't used to happen.
The church would provide shame? Is that what you said?
Yeah, of course.
Like they would shame her into staying in a marriage?
No, they would shame her from stepping out for arbitrary reasons.
Oh, I see. Holding her accountable. Like you're not doing what you should be doing.
Holding her accountable, saying, listen, how can you have these expectations that your husband makes these grandiose sacrifices for you, including taking a bullet, when you won't even submit to him?
So what would you say to a couple that is married where the wife's not submitting to the guy? What advice would you give that man?
That needs to behave and submit. What do you mean? That's exactly what you need to behave.
Or what? Or she should take a bullet?
You need to follow what your role is.
Well, he
inside
probably
a
already
marriage.
told her
now,
that.
if you don't have that, if you don't have a Christian marriage, my advice for you is why even get married? It's the stupidest thing on planet Earth.
That's my question. But I still think that people should get married because it's the right thing to do.
Why is it the right thing to do? Absent a religious marriage.
Well, this is a question that I have for myself.
Can you make a single reason why a secular person should actually get married?
Because there's a design behind getting married, and I'm asking because I genuinely question, like, if people don't have a real relationship with God, what is the point in getting married? Because the entire point
that's my point to you.
No, okay, but I'm saying that I still think that it's the right thing to do is to get married.
Yeah, but why?
Because the wrong thing to do is to continue to have sex outside of marriage.
Yeah, but I mean, both are wrong. The thing is from a secular
That's kind of like a legalistic view.
From a secularist perspective, right? Mm-hmm. They're not doing anything immoral. They're not Christians. So from their perspective, why in the world what would be the advantage to a state marriage for a secularist? There isn't any. There's no advantage to a male in a secular marriage. Can you name one?
Taxes.
No, not even. Because I don't think that's a good reason. I don't think that really benefits you at all. But
no, it doesn't.
Well, we need to fix this.
Yeah, but we can't fix it unless people submit to an ecclesiastical authority, and people will refuse to submit to an ecclesiastical authority, especially women.
To love Jesus.
Seemingly, consequences for women are not a thing that they like to see happen, and so they prefer to go through the state rather than a church ecclesiastical marriage because then they have some kind of safety net. Well, and so what's happened is inverted. Right now, society gives incentives to women to leave men, which is crazy. The opposite should be true. They should give them disincentives for leaving.